Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Lost Decades podcast. I'm Austin,
I'm Andrew.
and this episode we are covering the years 1750 BC to 1720 BC. 30 years. As you followers with a keen eye might have noticed, I have updated the podcast art where it now says World History 2026 BC to 2026 AD. 1700 is essentially the year when the Hittites really start forming. So they're up here in Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey. So kind of like the northeastern like coast of the Mediterranean. So real quick, the Hittites basically are at their peak from around right now, well, in a little bit, not quite right now, but it's 1700 to 1200 BC. And it's a little confusing because they are in the Bible, but now people are starting to kind of scrutinize whether the group we call the Hittites are the same thing as in the Bible. I'm not going to get into the whole naming thing, but just know that they called it Hattusa, which is named after the city. And let's see, they had their capital at Hattusa, and they spoke an Indo-European language, and they're one of the first Indo-European people. So notice how we've been talking a lot about like they're speaking Sumerian, they're speaking Akkadian, but the Hittites are actually speaking Indo-European, which is closer, as far as I know, to like English than
hmm
Sumerian technically, even though it's like super different. Um, and so it'll be cool because actually it'll be so I won't say too much, but in like essentially an episode or two, there'll be this guy King Hattusili the First, who will really expand the Hittites. So if you're Mesopotamia, you know you're going to kind of get a surprise from the area that we haven't heard much from, right? We've had kind of the Amorites, we've had the Elamites. I guess we're going to have the Kassites too, but we're also going to get the Hittites coming in. Um, and yeah, they were they're going to become one of the dominant superpowers along with Assyria and Mitanni, which I don't know too much about Mitanni, but they're also going to be big. And they had one of the first legal codes. They had a council of nobles. They were really good at ironworking. So they were actually, because this
It's not much later.
yeah, so I don't think this is like right away. And actually, no, sorry, I read
I mean,
somewhere.
yeah, the map's from 1300 BC.
Yeah, this map is definitely not. Yeah, this is really. It was just the best map I saw of like vaguely where the Hittites are. But this is
Makes
yeah,
sense.
this is them at like their peak in like hundreds of years. But also, yeah, now that I say that, I remember reading that it was kind of traditionally people used to think the Hittites were like, oh man, they had iron so much before the other people because they were still using bronze. But now they're starting to think that actually they had it at about the same time. It's just kind of like the way we found the evidence made it seem that way. But also the interesting thing about iron, which you probably know more about this than I, but it's just like it's not just that the Iron Age is a straight upgrade from the Copper Age. It's like, all right, iron's better than copper, or sorry, than bronze. It's that once you can figure out how to like smelt iron, it's like way more common. So
Yes.
you don't have to worry about the tin situation.
And it just being more useful for things like, because like bronze is really good for obviously like tools. Like we say building, but it's more for like tools like hammers and sickles and I guess just other things like that to build with. But iron is actually something you can use to like reinforce wood and like stick in stone. And so like it actually makes construction advance. The
Okay.
things that you can build.
Well, going back, wrapping up the Hittites, basically, this is skipping way ahead, but look forward to they're going to have a big clash with Ramses the Second.
Oh wow, that is a
The
wow.
first well-documented battles in history. And they were pretty religiously tolerant. They would kind of absorb gods when they would conquer people. They would just kind of add it to the pantheon. They called themselves the land of a thousand gods. But
That's
a
cool.
prominent storm god and a sun goddess. Classic. Um, they're masters of chariot warfare. They collapsed around 1200. And even though that happens, there's still the Neo Hittite city states that are kind of around in Syria and in the southeast Anatolia. And yeah, they have a good run. We'll get into them, but they're starting up now, so just know that. And then, excuse me, I wanted to get into the Minoans real quick. You know what? I'm just going to save the Minoans for next week because
Sure.
I already talked a lot. So we're just going to get into Egypt. So do you want to start out with Egypt?
I'll be honest, I didn't have a lot about Egypt other than
Same.
a little bit about we're starting in kind of getting into the 14th dynasty, but again, all the dynasties are kind of grouped together because it's all sort of happening at once. Again, Egypt, the reason it's called an intermittent period is because Egypt is not united. So this group is more from like the Levant and a lot of like modern day Palestine and stuff like that. And they're part of the group. They control just mainly the Nile Delta, like almost exclusively, but not much of the river outside of that. And they were kind of the
Right.
immigrants that had moved in and had Egyptianized and slowly were taking control of the region and being in charge. So they again controlled Lower Egypt and they just had, yeah, a series of kings and stuff like that. They were
And Lower
consolidated
Egypt is
power.
like the Delta, right?
Yeah, just the Delta. They built really big palaces, and the advantage of being at the Delta is their trade networks were much better than Upper Egypt. Mainly because Upper Egypt is having to, you need the Nile to travel, and there's not much there, where they're already on the Mediterranean. They're already getting all the trade from Mesopotamia, the Minoans, the Hittites, and stuff that are around, So,
They're closer to all those guys.
yeah, but I'll be honest, I didn't have a ton about them because, yeah, the more I researched, the more I realized they're just getting started and we kind of just discussed or I guess 2 episodes ago, discussed the 13th dynasty. And so that's the
Well,
14th one. They're actively competing with the 13th dynasty, but even wars and stuff like that are hard to gather because it's just a constant sort of push and pull of territory with, you know, dozens of kings.
so wait, the 13th dynasty was more in Upper Egypt?
Yes.
Okay,
They,
so
to
they
be
had
fair,
more of the
they're the ones who took over
resources.
first, and they had kind of all of Egypt, but they sort of
Yeah.
lost it over time. It was just splitting off, and then the 14th dynasty consolidated and ended up taking all of the Delta.
And the 14th dynasty is also, they're kind of like the Hyksos. They're the
Yeah.
people from the Levant. Okay.
Yes. No, and that's the thing. Whereas the Upper Egypt, 13th dynasty, is more pure Egyptian, if you will.
Hmm. So, yeah, I had some of the 13th dynasty, so the people that are in like southern Egypt. I have some of their names I can at least say. There was, well, okay, I'm starting with a rough one. Kahotep, Kahotepre Sobekotep the sixth,
My guy.
also known as Sobekotep the fifth,
Damn.
which is not confusing at all. Um, it's there's not much to say about him. He was only pharaoh for like 4 years, but there is at least statues of him. There was Neferhotep the first. Yeah, again, there's more about him, but nothing too crazy. Sahathor was after that. Him, he's ephemeral. It says he's ephemeral. There's no statues of him, just writing. Um,
And a
so
lot of these guys, I know they don't know the order sometimes. Like we think we do.
yeah.
A lot of times there's different conflicting lists of what's happening.
Then there's Conifere Sobek the fourth. So they really like this name Sobek and actually his brother. So he was brothers with Neferhotep and Sahathor. They came before him. So at least there was like a run of brothers.
Hmm.
But I'm not really sure, yeah, why they kept dying or whatever was going on. And last but not least, we got Mer Hotepre Sobek.
Who could forget?
Who could forget him?
my Halloween costume.
And I will actually show this statue of his because it is pretty cool. Very shiny. I mean, it's backlit, obviously, in this picture, but
How
um,
big is that though? Are we talking like to scale right now? Would we be standing up looking at that, or is this something they like held in their hand?
I mean, it's at the Cairo Museum. I mean, I think it's pretty big.
Okay.
I think it's like almost human size. Yeah, so that's
All
pretty
right.
impressive. I don't know what it's made out of. Probably, I guess everything's made out of just like stone. I don't
That's
actually know what they
there
would
you
build out of. Yeah. Um, but yeah, that's the state we're at in Egypt. Is it's just kind of like there's a bunch of people, we know their name, we might have a statue or two, we might have some writing, but it's only for a couple years, and they don't really say much about anything significant that they accomplished in their life.
Yeah, unfortunately, like when we do research about Egypt, it's very like, well, we don't know. This is like 200 years of, nah. Like, in
Yeah,
fact, a lot of videos and stuff kind of skip over this period. They're just like, oh, and there's the
right.
administrative period, and let's get to the
It's
new kingdom
chaotic.
period.
Yeah, but I do think it's interesting that it's like everything's divided and it's not really all united. Like things are
Hmm.
kind of going crazy. It's just hard to keep track of. Like I think it would have been an exciting time. It's like it's not stable, so I think it's like, oh wow, like so much is happening. But in history, it just kind of is like this blob of like confusion.
Yep.
But I am reading a book right now that I've read years ago, but I'm like rereading a book about Egypt. So hopefully I'll find some nuggets that'll we can share. But if there's nothing more about Egypt, we can move on to Babylon.
I feel bad. This is where a bulk of my research went.
Well, that's great. Well, we're getting to the juicy stuff then. So why don't you tell us what is
Well,
the
we
state
got
of
the
things?
the death of Hammurabi, and he's followed up by Samsu Iluna. And as you'd kind of expect, Hammurabi, remember, kind of like last minute made this empire. And I don't mean literally last minute, but like this was kind of a conquest of opportunity. Sort of just like, oh, I can see, I can take this guy. And these guys now I can turn on this guy and take this. And a side effect of that is when his son takes over, everyone's like, well, so I'm rebelling.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're not Hammurabi? I don't care about you. So his
So,
name's Samsu Iluna, right?
yeah,
Okay.
Samsu Iluna. And one of the things I saw that, I'll be honest, it doesn't come into play, but it was interesting. They talked about because I guess his father, we don't know why, maybe wanted to be more cultured or something like that, or he was working as an emissary. But he actually spent, so Shamshu Iluna spent a good chunk of his childhood and young adulthood in Mari, which again is that northern city that was conquered. Um,
Yeah,
and he actually ruled as a co-monarch. Funny enough, like from Egypt, that similar thing. He ruled as a co-monarch to help the transition. But
okay.
even
Yeah,
just a
that's
few
cool.
years into Hammurabi's death, Elam and Assyria essentially, the way I read it was they just said they left Babylon's sphere of influence. And what that makes me think is Babylon never really conquered them per se. They were kind of like vassal tributaries, if you kind of get what I mean. And so the second Hammurabi died, they're like, yeah, we're out. We're not part of the Babylon Empire anymore.
Okay.
Um,
They were fair
and
weather
they
friends.
yeah. And so now that Hammurabi's gone, actually the first 7 years, besides Elam and Assyria leaving, were pretty tame. It was more just reconstruction economic projects, different building temples and stuff like that. But then
Yeah.
in 1742, massive rebellion breaks out in Larsa, and with a name that's
Hmm.
somewhat familiar, Rimsin is back,
Oh,
but not really. It's
okay.
Rimsin in name only. He's a
Okay.
Reno, if you will. Um,
A Reno. Wait, what does that mean?
uh, Republican in name only.
Oh, oh, okay.
But it's
I
Rimsin
actually
in
don't know
name
that.
only. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to bring up politics. That was just
Yeah.
he. It's Rimsin the second. They don't know how he's related. They do think he's related to pick that name. probably a nephew or a different close relative. Um, and he was able to combine with essentially 26 other cities in Sumer and southern Akkad, including the big
Oh.
ones as Uruk, Isin, Nippur, and in the north, Eshnunna.
Hmm.
And the rebellion was actually due to several things, which I thought was interesting because I thought it would just be the simple, we don't like living under the yoke of Babylon. We don't like what Hammurabi did. He came around and just attacked us. But apparently, because this comes into play later, living conditions had just been worsening in Sumer and just southern Mesopotamia in general. Inflation was rampant, and there was a famine in the region. And so a lot of people were just unhappy with Babylon's rule in general. They felt like that Babylon directly contributed to these things happening to them, and they wanted to change. Um,
Okay.
and even though they broke off with Rim Sim leading as a rebel, all of the different city states, I think all of them, but maybe not 100% of them, declared their own kings. The big ones being Rim Anum from Uruk and Iluni of Eshnunna and Ilum Ma Ili of Isin,
Okay.
which is just kind of funny to see Larsa, Isin back again, working together to take on
You
Babylon,
counted them out.
you know?
They're back.
And
So
so they, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, so okay, no, keep going because I'm just curious. Like after all this happens, like what city would you say is on top? Like, is it still
Oh, but that's
Babylon?
what I'm getting into. So it's
Or,
interesting.
yeah.
All these cities rise up, but one of them betrays them, Rim Unum of Uruk, essentially betrays them and joins Babylon, and then starts attacking Rimsin, which causes a fracturing inside the rebellion, which allows Samu Iluna to basically come in and mop up and take over everything again.
Mhm.
And he's able within 4 years to just consolidate everything back again under his control. But this had kind of irreparable damage on the South because by 1720, um, Babylon's control over the South was almost non-existent anymore because
Right, it
that
was like
whole
the
region.
Sealand dynasty.
Yes, and the Sealand Dynasty, I have some stuff on them, not a lot, because apparently all we really know is what Babylon wrote about them. That's all we really know.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so they were part of the marshlands of southern Mesopotamia, and it was sparsely populated. And it was the Iluma Ili, the guy who claimed to be from Isin, who were claimed to be one of the last kings of Isin, and he caused another revolt. But in this time, um, Babylon essentially, Samsu Iluna basically just left the region. And it's interesting because they say, looking at it, that's what gets into the interesting part is he saw some people think it might have been more of a tactical retreat because the region was becoming less and less significant, which I'll get to in a second. Because one of the last things he did was he built a bunch of forts around Nippur because you remember how important that was to be claimed king of Sumer and Akkad. But ironically, Babylon didn't because Babylon took it all, so they claimed this is all just Babylon. But so he was trying to hold Nippur, but he couldn't. The Sealand dynasty took it. Um,
And they're pretty far south, and Nipper is pretty far north. So,
Ish. You can see it on the
yeah.
map. It's because you got to think at this time Mari is still under control
Oh,
of
true.
Babylon
Actually,
and
yeah,
stuff like that.
it's still south of Babylon. Yeah, that's true.
Um, but in this case, he wait, what? Oh yeah, I didn't talk about too Eshnunna because one of the parts of that is Eshnunna, remember, also rebelled at the same time, but they weren't so lucky. So even though they did lose, Babylon went through and essentially consolidated everything with them to essentially drag them into Babylon as like a permanent resident, made them just part of the Babylonian Empire, integrated their people, integrated their writing, integrated their lands, and everything like that. Whereas Southern Sumer wasn't quite the same. And so, because of all the wars in Southern Sumer, when Samsu Iluna went down there, he tore down the walls of many of these cities, which left them and didn't repair them.
Mhm.
So he left them completely undefended. So our good old friend Elam came in and actually took
Hmm.
over a lot of these territories.
A lot
And
of wow, just like all of Babylon, like
no, not Babylon, but Sumer.
so like the lower part.
The lower part. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like Isin and South.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, those Elamites, they're always at the ready. They come out of
they
nowhere.
are. They're looking for just any opportunity. I also put that they looted the statue of Inanna, which was one of their gods, from um Uruk. And apparently it wasn't returned until 11 centuries later.
Wow. That is crazy.
So we're talking way later.
Imagine that now. It's like, yeah, we stole something in the year 900 and now
And
we're
we're
returning
just
it
now
to you.
getting it back. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, yeah, in Assyria, they had a rebellion. Again, they set themselves as independent, but they also had a bunch of people vying for the throne. I wrote names down, but I realized the names are kind of unimportant because they all disappear from the records, other than the who comes out ahead, and that
Okay.
is Adasi, who essentially becomes and starts a new dynasty in Assyria that'll become important later. But one of the key things is it removes any Amorite Babylon influence from Assyria, and it's more just Assyrian natives instead ruling. And it shows that Babylon couldn't really maintain control because you think that during the Civil War he'd be able to easily march up there and take this back, but he really couldn't. There was too much other stuff going on in the south and other things like that. Um, he was powerless to intervene. Um,
Yeah, so it seems like Babylon, like, I don't know, is it similar to how it looks on this map where it seems like all these other places are pretty independent? Like
yeah,
it
it's
doesn't
actually
seem to look
not like
much.
it is on this map. Yeah.
Right, because it's later on. So it'd be like if this part was orange,
Yeah.
the bottom.
And Elam controls it, but then that ends up becoming the Sea Land dynasty also that's independent from Elam but friendly with them.
Okay.
And they control Mari and they control a lot of this red stuff, but then Oster still is here controlling all this blue.
And then Yaman
Um,
and Fatna are both independent.
yeah.
And then yeah,
So
on this map you can see the Hittites up here
and the
and
Minoans over there.
the Minoans over there. So we'll get to the Minoans next week. But
And so it's interesting because one of the reasons this kind of happened, and that's what really fascinated me about my research for this one, was this period kind of started the decline of Sumer in general. So
Hmm.
a lot of different things happened, but this essentially starts what's called the depopulation of Sumer or Sumatra.
So when you say
And
Sumer, is it like the whole like kind of Babylon area or just the
oh no,
sea
Sumer
and
is southern
lower?
Mesopotamia. So it's like
Okay.
from
Like Nippur down.
probably from Nippur south.
Okay.
Um,
So do they know why?
yeah, and that's the thing. We don't know 100% why, but there's a lot of guesses that seem to track. And
Okay.
one of them is that all of these wars in the region were actually taking its toll, essentially because these cities are getting their walls ripped down and the men getting killed. But they talk about how that can't be the only impact because there's a lot of wars up north, and yet the north is still thriving. But
Right.
because one of the things is, yeah, in the 10th year of Samshu Ina's reign, Uruk and Ur just are not on the record anymore at all, anywhere. And then his 29th year, Nippur and Isin also ceased to exist, which is crazy.
One of those things. I mean, that is crazy that Nipper doesn't exist because that was such a big thing. But it's like, I mean, also well, all of these. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. It kind of you could see it like because that area is what you were just saying was Sealand and it was Elam. It's like there's war everywhere, but it feels like the Sumer area has a lot of battles happening. So maybe they just got really unlucky and all the cities just got literally destroyed.
Well, yeah, and it has to do with the 4.2 kiloyear event
Right.
and the way that's a flat region. Because, like, one of the things they talk about is because of this decline, which I guess I'll get into again, what caused the decline first before I get to why the
Yeah.
decline is important. because I ended up just looking up a whole thing about like why the decline happened specifically. And
Hmm.
so one of it is because the area is very flat and the water table is rising, um,
Hmm.
there it's causing a lot of salt from the ocean to push into the water table underneath and leach into the rivers, which is causing the rivers to get a lot more salty. And so a lot of the crops like wheat can't survive and they have to switch to
Hmm.
barley, which is still fine, but not as effective and not as efficient. And then the barley starts to not die as or not survive as well, which leads to massive amounts of starvation, malnutrition, and famine. And this isn't helped by um, the fact that yeah, the Euphrates River, as its sediment builds up, it creates mounds, and the Euphrates River starts to divert into a different direction, which causes a lot of the cities to just completely all their irrigation because they've been over irrigated, has causes massive just changes in position of the rivers, and then they some cities just entirely lose access to water completely at all.
Oh wow.
And that combined with the fact that there's lots of wars and rebellions and stuff in the region means that when these aqueducts are destroyed, when these irrigation canals are destroyed, or when the cities are destroyed, or all the men die, they can't bounce back like they used to. They don't have the resources. So it's kind of like the finishing blow that knocks them down. And from this point onward, it's kind of Akkad rising and Sumer declining to the point that yeah, they consider granted some of these cities come back later, but for the next several hundred years, Nippur, Uruk, Isin, Larsa are just completely abandoned.
That is crazy to think about. I mean, the same thing even happened with like London, where it was a city during Roman times, and then people just kind of like completely abandoned it. And it's just crazy to imagine London in that time was just like ruins, and then obviously now it's like one of the biggest cities in the world. But that kind of happens here, where it's like the, you know, Paris of its time, and then it gets completely abandoned, but then
Yeah,
it does come
it's
back. But
it's crazy because it's something that's funny that I couldn't appreciate until we started doing this podcast because now I'm like, oh my gosh, these cities, especially when we say Nipper, I'm like, they're so important. They've been
hmm.
so important for so long, and to just be straight up abandoned, like just like,
Yeah.
oh, they're just gone. And like even a key thing too is like the whole title of Sumer and Akkad. Babylon made that kind of irrelevant. It was now just seen as Babylonia, and so
Right.
people didn't really care about Nippur as being like, well, it's now you can claim the title of Sumer and Akkad. People are like, what the hell even is that?
Mm-hmm.
And
Because you
this
got
is
to think, I mean, yeah, we've covered like multiple centuries now. So when we
yeah,
were really in the deep, even in the Isin Larsa period, like the early Isin Larsa, it was like all about Nippur. But that's these people that are alive now in like 1720. That's like their like great grandpa. Like for us, it's like we have like I have no idea what they were doing or care. You know, it's like it
yeah,
was such
no,
a
and I
different
think
world.
it's just funny too because I know we didn't cover it because it was before we started, but again, Sumer was the beginning of all of this, at least in
Yeah.
Mesopotamia. It was and it was
Hmm.
Uruk. Or, I mean, Uruk was like the first city, and then
Yeah.
Nippur was the first holy city, and
Yeah.
then it's been spreading from there, and that's what led to Akkad and the Akkadian Empire, which
Hmm.
led to the whole Sumer and Akkad, seen as these two regions that are so important.
Combined.
And
Yeah.
now we're seeing Sumer literally just die.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff I read too showed that Babylon again contributed to this, not intentionally, but remember I said the rebellions came from poor living conditions. It's mainly because after all of Hammurabi's wars and stuff, he didn't really bother to rebuild these areas because he could kind of see them deteriorating, which led them to rebel again, which led to more wars, which led to the region just getting decimated, which led to Babylon being like, that's what I mean by tactical retreat. They're like, we don't really even need this region anymore. It's not really worth anything. All the people are leaving. The cities are mostly destroyed and can't be rebuilt. The farms are all dying. The waters have changed direction. It's
Hmm.
too much work. And they don't have even the spiritual connection to care. And so that's how you get this Lancy dynasty that comes in that we know almost nothing about because they're just like, oh, we'll live in the swamp. We'll rule this region. Babylon could probably come in and beat them easily, but they're like, but why? It's not worth the resources.
Right. I know. It's one of those things that like when you're kind of just doing the overarching history, it's such a like footnote of like, okay, yeah, like Sumer
Hmm.
collapses for this time and this happened. But if you're living through it, it'd be like if all of a sudden, just because I'm the first thing that popped in my head, it's like, I don't know, let's say Boston just collapses after all this time and just everyone leaves Boston. And then all of a sudden, like Providence, Rhode Island becomes like this major metropolis. It's like if you were in 1,000 years, people reading history, like no one, it's not that interesting. It's like, okay, so then some other city becomes popular in the same area, but if you're living through it, that's like a huge change, especially if you're living in
Hmm.
Boston.
Because yeah, it's sort of yeah, because that's what I wrote in one of my. The rise of Babylon marks the definite end to Sumerian cultural dominance over Mesopotamia and the shift to Akkadian cultural governance and popular writing. So, because again, Babylon is Akkadian. So it's this shift
Mm.
of just a Akkad and Akkadian language. We've been talking about this in general too, that Akkadian's been getting more popular. Most of the common people speak it. But this is like the death blow of like, it went from just Sumer's like, oh, that's the thing my grandpa spoke, or that's from the old times, to just, what even
Yeah.
is Sumer? I don't even know what that is. Like, I've never
Right.
heard of
Right.
that. Like,
And yes, and it's also over time, it's eventually gonna, the Red Sea is, or the Persian Gulf is gonna go further out. So those cities
yeah.
won't
Oh,
be
one
able
of the things I put,
to.
they said is they think that Hammurabi and Rimsin, not this new Rimsin, Rimsin, the original one that we talked about last episode, a lot of them were probably doing a lot of economical developments and stuff that were very short-sighted, focused on just their needs at this moment, that were causing long-term environmental damage to the region that were unsustainable.
Right. They don't know all the yeah, all the chemistry that, oh yeah, if we
Well,
do
again, over irrigating the rivers or just noticing that,
yeah.
oh, the river seems to be shifting and not preparing for that. They're like, oh, no, I'm sure this is fine. The river will stay here. So.
Hmm. It's always been here. Why would it move?
And so, yeah, they said a lot of these cities are uninhabited up until around the Kassite t period, which is much later. 1531, in fact, is when it starts. But I still thought that was just crazy because, again,
Yeah,
like 1720.
but it does seem from what I was reading that yeah, the Kassites they're gonna come down from the Zagros Mountains, right? So kind of like near Elam, but they're not Elamites.
Yeah.
So they're gonna come down, but it does seem like even though that hasn't happened yet, Babylon's not really in a great place, and the Kassites are like slowly in the shadows, like building up right now. So they
It's
haven't
funny to
done it
see
yet. But
too, because I always heard Babylon, for being as famous as it is, was very short-lived in the footnotes of history. And I feel like we are kind of seeing that right now. It's not that what they did didn't matter, because it was actually very
hmm
significant. Again, they kind of rewrote the region to be seen as Babylon. It's almost like
hmm
no one cared about Sumer and Akkad. It was Babylonia. That was the region.
But it's really just Hammurabi, like kind of
Yeah,
on
it's
his
really
own.
just Hammurabi, where his son is just barely holding on, and we'll get into it next episode, but their kids are don't do much better at keeping this together.
But yeah, it is weird because it feels like, oh yeah, everyone knows Hammurabi, but it seems like when you actually hear about the Babylonians, it's basically the Neo-Babylonians that are going to
Yeah.
come later. They're actually the ones that are big. Same with like the Neo-Assyrians. But
Yes, same thing. It's funny. I mean, again, kind of like we know the Akkadian Empire a little bit, but the more famous one is Ur-3, which is also Neo-Akkadian Empire. So, I don't
hmm,
know. It
good
feels
point.
like when they do it the second time around, they
Yeah,
always do a lot better.
yeah, which kind of yeah, they're building. Um, all right. So what technically like is there a name for this period we're in? It's kind of like is it like the
We're just
collapse
considered
the
the Old Babylonian period.
and then we're going to enter like the Kassite period eventually?
I believe so. I don't know if we enter like High Babylonian period and then Kassite period because Kassites do
Mhm.
take control of Babylon. So it's kind of with that too. But yeah, so we're getting, I guess, out of the because we've got about four kings left. I don't remember how long they last, but four kings left of the first Babylonian dynasty, and then they're gone. All
Wow.
of Hammurabi's lineage is just gone after that.
So Well, I think yeah, I think it'll get it'll things are going to start heating up because especially in Egypt, I think once the Hyksos really kind of take over, and I think there'll be more to say about that. And Babylon, I'm not sure. But I do think it's kind of convenient because as these two are kind of getting a little bit more like lost to the sands of time, is like right around, like I was saying at the beginning of the episode, we're gonna get the Hittites coming in up here in the northwest, and then I'm excited next week to talk about the Minoans, especially. I've always
Yeah,
had
they're
a
cool.
soft spot for the people they traded with are up here, the Cycladic on these islands kind of like between like modern day Turkey and Greece. And I will give a little sneak peek of their art because I think these are the Cycladic civilization. But I always liked, even though it's like such old sculpture, it looks kind of weirdly modern because it's very like
Yeah.
minimalist.
Well, and I love that they, granted, distantly, but lead to what becomes modern Greek culture. Not even
Mhm.
modern, sorry, classical Greek culture.
Yeah. So I'm definitely excited to talk about the Minoans and because they're really kind of at their peak now.
Their
And as
peak
I
is yeah
said, yeah,
just starting. That's what's awesome.
hmm,
Yeah,
they're
I
just
read a
getting
lot about them too, and
started.
I'm excited.
It seems like they've been there, obviously, on the island, but they're starting to actually have like a stratified society. So they're building palaces. They have a government. Um,
One of the first
yeah,
naval societies. I can't say
yeah,
definitively the first, but one of the
one of
most
the first for
important naval societies.
sure. Yeah, and there's some interesting stuff where just their involvement with like the sea peoples, like much later with the
I did
Rock
think that was
collapse.
interesting
But
too. Yeah.
that's what's so cool is like for us, we think about, obviously like Greece and even Italy, but for most of this like early ancient civilizations, those places are so far west that they're like these crazy, like mysterious people that
Hmm.
they have no idea what they're doing. I mean, they might have traded with them occasionally, but like they're so far away. And also Lucca on this map too. I
Yeah.
think it's also known as Lycia. They're going to be big.
Plumbing.
So yeah, I think next week we'll do 1720 to 1700, just kind of keep it clean. We can kind of do like a retrospective on like the 1700s or something.
Because again, I'm still
But
blown away at Sumer disappearing. Like, sorry, that just was like reading that. I was
no, it
so
is crazy.
there's so much talking about this region and its impact. I'm like, I can't believe it's like straight up gone. And again, it's not gone. People still live there. We have the Landseed dynasty. I don't mean to like
But we don't know
over
much about
exaggerate, but
them.
it is a huge falling from grace.
I know, and I think that's what's weird about reading like especially such old history is you just know that if we had record, maybe they wrote stuff down, but either they didn't write it and it got lost or they never wrote anything. But if they'd been able to write about their experience, you'd have all these crazy stories about their city being destroyed and just there's a lot of craziness going on. We just literally like don't have the like on the ground stories. We just know kind of like what happens, but um it almost feels like anticlimactic where it's just like wow, these have been so important and then it's like oh, and then everyone just kind of like leaves. But
Yeah.
like, they just leave like abandon the city. Um yeah, that is crazy. And is there anything else you wanted to add about anything we've talked about so far?
No, I'm very curious what starts to happen next with all these massive changes.
Oh, I will show this because I this is about the Minoans, but I just thought it was a cool map. Because I mean, this goes all the way to 1200, but this is kind of the people that they would trade with. So that's one of my favorite things that I learned about the Bronze Age is it was so long ago, but technically goods from Egypt were eventually could conceivably make their way all the way, like probably stopping multiple places, but they could go all the way to like Sardinia or like
Hmm.
Sicily or like somewhere else in Italy, which
Yeah,
nowadays
or
doesn't
even
feel that
Crimean
far by plane,
Peninsula.
but yeah. Um, and this is just so we're still so far before we're even right where we're at now is even before most of the Greek myths. The only Greek
Yeah.
myth that we really kind of sort of have right now is the Minoan, like the Minotaur being in the labyrinth and the guy follows it. Like that's supposed to be on Crete. So that's like the Minoans, and um, that's kind of apparently one of the first myths.
That is really cool.
So
I don't
anyway,
know.
we'll get into that, but you know, we're kind of in the middle of transition.
We are. But at least for some good stories in the future. People get a rise from the ashes.
And you know what might happen if you are in, let's say, Egypt and you're trying to sail to Sardinia in like 1700 BC, what might happen?
Oh, I think I know what might happen.
You might
Get
get
lost.
lost.